Today on Follow the Compass North, we're going to determine whether or not my camera is high enough off my work surface to prevent fire damage. And we're going to do that using two different types of tinder. We have our man-made up here and our natural. Our man-made is going to be our cotton infused with Vaseline, our wet fire, trioxane, magnesium, and dryer lint. Our natural, we're going to be using heartwood shavings, cotton non-infused, and feather sticks. Now some of these are going to be a little bit harder to light, some are a little bit easier to light, some are easier to procure, and some are harder to procure. So in order to go through each one and determine the pros and cons, we're just going to start lighting them on fire and talking at the same time. I'm going to start with cotton. Cotton's on both sides. Now you could argue that yes, in the lint there's quite a bit of cotton as well. In mine there's wool, there's hair, there's a few things in here that actually makes it quite pungent to the burning smell. And you could argue that because this has cotton, it's a natural type, or that the cotton strands woven this way makes it a man-made. We're going to be sticking primarily to natural fibers versus man-made or man-made modified types of tinders here. So when we're looking at our cotton, I like to usually use cotton balls. They're very easy to open up and to aerate and create a substance that easily catches sparks from our fire steel. However, today I'm going to be using and trying out cotton gauze. I figure if we have a med kit on us, if we're out in the wilderness and we're digging through our stuff, we're likely to have some gauze available, so ripping this up and seeing how well it catches a spark. I then took a little bit of extra Vaseline that I had from the med kit and rubbed it into this to create a Vaseline infused cotton ball. A literal ball this time, not a cotton ball, a piece of cotton rolled into a ball. We'll start by lighting this one off and then lighting this one as well. Actually, if I light this one, then this one I'm probably going to burn myself, so I'm going to light this one, then come back and light this guy. These can be a little harder to light unless you set yourself up for success by pulling them apart and creating that nice bed, that aerated fibrous material. And even so, you have to warm up the Vaseline. So I'm going to be putting a lot of force, creating some sparks, or creating some shavings. That way when I spark, it lights those up and lights the Vaseline. So I'm kind of using the fire steel itself as a primary tinder and then the tinder here as a secondary tinder. Same thing here, I'm going to carve off a little bit and then dig in and light it. Now you'll see they burn differently. This one's been burning much higher, it's a blacker smoke, it's billowing, and then this guy's burned down fairly quickly. Even though I lit this one first, it's burning a lot longer, a lot hotter, and a lot bigger just because I infused it with a little bit of Vaseline or any kind of petroleum jelly. I found that you can even use Vicks Vapor Rub. It smells quite nice and it burns for a long period of time. Our cotton here is already gone and it's barely usable here for the purposes of fire. If I'm going to be using cotton by itself, not infused, I'm going to make some feather sticks as well to use as a secondary tinder. That way I have a primary and a secondary. While this is flaring up, I know it's not going to last very long. I'm going to take the feather sticks and drop it right on there, but that'd ruin this demonstration. Alright, let's knock these two out. We've got our heartwood shavings. All I did here was to put the knife perpendicular to my pine here. This doesn't work very well with hardwoods. And I just scrape off some shavings. So be very careful when you do this. As you're dragging along, if you have anything beyond, it falls off, you can cut yourself. So I want to place this onto the surface and then do some parallel scraping. I've already done the majority of this. I'm just showing some for example. Knock those off. And I'm going to want a big pile of this, several golf balls at least. This one here is just enough to do a demonstration without burning my camera. When this one starts going, we're going to grab the feather sticks and add them to that. However, you can light these directly. I might leave a few there for another demonstration. So again, I'm going to carve off a little bit and then get the spark going. Carve off a little and get that spark going. Alright. Now when you get the edge lit there, It's not going to last very long. That's where I'm going to take my secondary tinder, place it over top, and then I can move on to my larger fire prep, which will be in another video. This one's going to burn pretty well. Feather sticks tend to do pretty well. We're going to have a little difficulty lighting feather sticks directly. It can be done with the proper technique with enough shavings in the beginning. However, using a primary tinder to light feather sticks is a preferred method. Now, we're going to be doing an entire lesson on just making good feather sticks. What type of wood selection, making nice long feathers, sharpening the knife beforehand. We're going to take our time and do this one right. Today I just knocked out some easy ones so that we can do a demonstration. Alright, we'll carve off a little bit more to begin, and then hit it hard, get those hot sparks. And again, this will be very difficult to do without a primary tinder underneath. Let me try again. We'll carve off some of that metal match. Ooh. Oh, we had it. There we go. Notice for this one I had to really dig in there, really carve off a chunk of this, and don't be afraid of that. If you're worried about the type of technique you're using, or you're not having much success with the fire steel, go and check out our other video. I did a whole video on different techniques with the fire steels and different types of fire steels out there. Everything from our magnesium block with the ferro rod to the ferro rod by itself, and what brand we like to use here. Alright, she's gonna burn nice and easy for us. I'm gonna give it a moment so I don't burn myself reaching over and getting these other ones. There's a litany of other natural tinders out there. There are mosses and air plants and different leaves and twigs and sticks, etc., that you can turn into good natural tinders out there. There's probably hundreds of options globally. Anything that is very dry, very aerated, and very fine should light on fire in a natural environment. I would not use furs or animal products. They tend to smolder, not burn. I would lean more towards plants and dried plants, extraordinarily dried mosses and whatnot. As long as you can turn it into a aerated, dry substance that can catch a spark, you can make a tinder out of it. These top ones here, I'm going to save these three for last. I'm going to hit the lint very easily. This is just dryer lint. Mine is, like I said earlier, very pungent because it has a lot of wool products in it. And when I light this, it lights very easily. This one's going to smolder a little bit, like I said, because of the wool, but it's basically lighting that very fine aerated cotton that is in the majority of clothes these days, cotton blend. You also get a smell of the burning plastic from polyester on that one too. But in a pinch, lint does light on fire. You can use that to hit some feather sticks and have an easy day. It takes a little more precision to hit magnesium. Magnesium is just scraped off of this cheap Coleman fire seal block that you get at Walmart or any other sporting goods store. It's about $5 to $10 for these things. You scrape the magnesium off the back like you would heartwood shavings, or I like to actually dig into it like I'm using a fire steel and get these fibrous shavings. This is not a ferro rod. If I strike this, it will not spark no matter what I do. The ferro rod is on the back side for lighting this. I might be able to get it here. I do not like using this one because you can't get it down into the tinder itself. If you were to cut this here on a bandsaw very carefully in a very wet condition bandsaw, you could make a much nicer setup for striking. Vertical is hard to do with these, but you have to get it pretty much vertical in order to get the sparks where you want them to be. Once you light it, it flares up really quickly and the soot flies off and it's over. That was the whole thing. Hopefully I got my knife out of there in time for you to see some of that burning. It goes very fast. Magnesium is an excellent primary tinder. It's a great way to start something else, but you're not going to be lighting this and putting sticks right on top or bark or anything that still has a little bit of moisture. This is going to be a primary tinder to quickly light maybe some feather sticks or light some thicker birch bark style tinder or cedar bark, which are also very hard to work with. This is going to be something that can get those going. Wet fire and trioxane are two chemical compounds. Wet fire and hexamine are very similar. Trioxane is a little harder to come by. I always go out and try to find them at Army surplus stores. They're in these green packets. They'll say trioxane ration heating. They're used for the old sea rations way back. I don't even think they make this anymore. So if you can get a hold of these trioxane packets, do so. They light very easily. They burn for a long time. You can use it multiple times. If you light it and then put it out, you can light it again. Wet fire is the modern equivalent. You can get this, you can order this online. I don't know where I got this. It was in some survival kit somewhere. I've got a whole handful of them. I think there's a stove out there that uses wet fire hexamine tablets as a way of boiling water, chemically burning and then boiling water. I'm a big fan of the jet boil series or any butane system, so I don't use the chemical tablets, but I have one here for today. Trioxane's easy. We're gonna grab a little spark off this ferro rod and light it up. The problem with trioxane is it burns so efficiently that even when we do get it lit, as it is now, very difficult to tell that that is actually burning. So what I'm going to do here is show you that I know it's burning. There's a few indicators. Well, one, it's burning the wood around it. That's a pretty clear indicator. It's turning darker, and you have a very light blue flame on there. If I were to take something else and put it in there, it would start to burn normally. So you can light other stuff on fire with this to tell that it's lit. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and produce a massive amount of heat. Very efficient fire, but I've lit trioxane and then reached in to reposition it, not realizing it was already burning, and I've burnt my hand several times just misidentifying that it's going at all. All right, you see there, it's still going. Very hot. It's very similar to like a sterno, but it's a hard, crumbly surface instead of a wet surface. Wet fire comes out of the packet kind of moist. I don't know if that's where it's got its name or not, or the fact that it can start in wet conditions. That's the brand of it. I showed you the packaging. Again, none of these here are sponsors or just things that I have. But I have a hard time lighting wet fire with a ferro rod. A lighter lights this right up. Any kind of open flame lights it, no problem. If I'm using wet fire, I shave some off, chop it up. In fact, that's all we're gonna need. And when I get it very fine, it tends to catch a spark a little bit better. There we go. All right, I don't always get that quickly, so it's kind of nice, unless I call attention to it. Burns much more obviously than the trioxane, but it burns very similarly. It's a breakdown, chemical breakdown. It's got its own oxidizer built in, so if you cover this thing up, it'll smolder for quite some time. It's very difficult to put out. Same as with the trioxane, which is why they're so efficient. Such good ways of starting fires. This will burn for a long time. You can you can take this type of chemical tinder and dry out semi-wet wood to the point where you can light it on fire. If you have wet wood or wood that has wet bark or is still a little greenness to it, you might be able to dry that out enough with these tinders to still start a fire. If you're using natural tinders and trying to put wet wood on here, you're gonna have a hard time. So I always keep a couple of bars of trioxane in the bottom of my pack. And you're thinking, wow, you mentioned a lot of things in the bottom of your pack. Well, my pack's getting kind of heavy, that's true. But I throw a couple of these in the bottom of my pack. And if I have a really bad day where it's raining and wet and I can't find dry wood anywhere, I'm gonna pull this out and use it as an emergency. However, if I can procure natural tinder, I'm gonna do that 9 times out of 10. Because this way I'm not burning the resources that I brought out to the field. I'm only burning the resources that I'm able to procure. And I'm doing that in a safe manner. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not going to go through the entire series of events that you need to do in order to start a fire here. This is not a fire building lesson at all. This is just the different types of tinder that we can use. We didn't even cover how to use the ferro rod. That is a different video that's already up and running. But in the future, when we go to build a fire, I don't need to talk about how to use a ferro rod. I won't need to talk about our different types of tinder. I might show the one that I'm using that day and light it and get a fire going, but these are our foundational lessons that let us really execute when the time comes. If you enjoyed our content today, please leave a like, a comment down below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We go through and make sure we answer every single one that we get. If you enjoyed it enough to check out some of our other videos, we'd appreciate it. And as always, please subscribe. Thank you and have a great day.